down to 10. Tries to split a double team, throws it up, and there's 1,000 points for Landon Butler.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here are your hosts, Jack Ridenour and Sean Meyers.
And we welcome you into another edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood Podcast right here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Sean Meyers, Jack Ridenour talking the biggest stories in high school basketball across Westmoreland County. We've got a lot to get to on this episode. We'll have, of course, the plays of the week. We're going to talk about our team of the week. That is the Greater Latrobe girls basketball team. They are red hot as of late. We'll have our trivia question. We'll also give the answer to last week's trivia question, and we'll look ahead at the games on the slate for this upcoming week. But, Jack, we've got a lot to get to with our starting five, our biggest takeaways. And before we get into any specific stories, just kind of broadly, not a great week for some of the top teams in Westmoreland County, both boys and girls. Some big-time showdowns, unfortunately, more times than not, our teams did not come out on top of those ones.
As an old saying goes, Sean, this is a week I think a lot of the coaches in the Westmoreland County area would like to just burn the tape and move on. So I think this is a week that everybody will scratch and we'll try and move on to the next week and kind of build on this week and learn from it as well.
Well, first, let's begin with the Penn Trafford girls, and they went 0 for 2 in two really marquee showdowns this week. You and I were on the call of their loss at home against McKeesport, and man, I came away more impressed by McKeesport than disappointed by Penn Trafford, to be honest. I think McKeesport's just that good. 59-35, although I think the score maybe not really indicative. It was a very competitive game until the fourth quarter. But PT also lost to Oakland Catholic earlier in the week on the road, 61-43. So a couple of fairly lopsided setbacks against two of the better teams. I think if nothing else, this shows that they have a long way to go still to compete with the top two teams in this section.
Yeah, and it definitely shows them where they are right now and how they kind of stack up against these other top tier teams. And not to mention, we mentioned McKeesport, we mentioned Penn Trafford, we mentioned Oakland Catholic, but there's another team in there in the Greater Latrobe Wildcats that are also off to a really great start. We'll mention them a little bit later on today, but four really good teams. And you mentioned it a lot, Sean, and I kind of walked away and said, he might be right. McKeesport right now looks like, from what we've seen, the best team in 5A. I have yet to see another girls basketball team that looks that well ran in terms of just from the coaching standpoint. I think Amy Gumbert has got this group in a really good spot of the year. If I'm not mistaken, 12-1 overall. So, and they also went up against a really good team in Norwin earlier this year. And I felt like that was a very defining win for them when they really blew open the doors on that one. 47-37 the final on that one. They held Norwin scoreless in the third quarter. 16-0 was the score in that third quarter. So this McKeesport team led by Rachel Manfredo, who I know you and I had a lot of really good things to say about on the broadcast Friday night. I was really impressed with her. And another thing, like we continue to mention, there's no athletes on this McKeesport team that is committed to play basketball at the Division I or really at any level at the collegiate level.
Well, on the Penn Trafford side, they had just one player scoring double figures in that game. Peppel scored 15, but even then she had to work for it. Ultimately, I think, like you said, it kind of, let's move on from this one because it was a rough week, but it's been a great season for Penn Trafford. Their only loss prior to this week came against Norwin. So I think they're still going to be fine. But when they see these teams, Oakland Catholic and McKeesport, the second time around, they're going to have to make strides if they want to compete and maybe knock those teams off. I think when we were there on Friday, the focus was on the girls matchup, but we had a really intriguing boys matchup at Penn Trafford as the Warriors hosted Greater Latrobe, and those teams have struggled. They were looking for their first section win. Ultimately, it was Greater Latrobe who got it, but in the process, a really exciting moment because Landon Butler, the outstanding senior, got his 1,000th point. Earlier in the week, Yawk's Tara Crosby, who, by the way, is just a junior, got 1K. So it was a pretty big accomplishment for two outstanding players in Westmoreland County last week, Jack. I know we see it happen fairly often, but still, that's a significant milestone.
Oh, significant to say the least. I mean, as a former player myself, I look back and think of, I wasn't even close to 200 points in high school, right? I mean, these players are hitting 1,000. And like you said, Crosby's at 1,000. And he's still got another whole year, obviously the rest of this year, but another year after it to continue to add on. And he also became the 6th male player at York to reach the 1,000-point milestone. And then Landon Butler joining his older brothers in the 1,000-point club. So
and
really,
his
really
dad,
cool moment.
by the way.
And his dad. I mean, hey, listen, I said it to you on Friday night. Imagine the battles in the driveway with the Butler family. I mean, all of the brothers going at it, even the dad. I mean, that must have been such a fun thing for them all growing up. And when we talked with Landon Butler in the post-game show, I mean, I asked him, I said, were you aware of how many points you needed? And he said, yeah, he was well aware of it. You, on the other hand, look at a player like Tarek Crosby. You asked him a couple weeks ago, he had zero clue how many points he had coming into the year. So cool little kind of one player is aware, the other is not, but you could tell Landon Butler, the way he was playing the first few minutes of play, he really wanted to get that 1,000-point mark.
And now the pressure is on younger brother Max, a sophomore for Greater Latrobe, trying to join his 3 older brothers in the 1,000-point club for the Wildcats. Well, we mentioned it was kind of a tough week for some of the better teams in Westmoreland County, and that applies on the boys' side as well. Belle Vernon area dropped a tough one against Laurel Highlands. That is such an anticipated showdown. Last year, James Franklin and Pat Narduzzi were both there because they were scouting both Quentin Martin and Rodney Gallagher on the football field. But, man, they're great basketball players. Gallagher, again, with some late heroics, Keandre DeShields for the Mustangs. But BVA was right there, Jack. They had a fourth-quarter lead. I think that they can at least pull from that they might be well-positioned the second time around to try to close it out.
Yeah, and on top of it, they overcame a 10-point halftime deficit. That's really hard to do, especially with, 16 minutes of basketball. I mean, you don't really have a whole lot of time to make up that big of a difference. But, Belle Vernon, they bounced back after that loss. They got a big win against Albert Gallatin, 82-49. And this is what's impressive to me, Sean. Even though this team loses one game, they'll bounce back and they'll score points at an incredible rate. 3rd game this year that they've scored 80 or more points. And again, we still have a lot of basketball to be played. And they've done that over the last, I would say, month or so. So they're starting to pick up right at the right time. Quentin Martin with 19 points. Zion Moore had 17 points. Trevor Kovac had 16 points. And I think right there, that's a key thing. If they can get a 3rd player, even a 4th player at times, to step up and help out Martin, help out Moore with the scoring, it'll just allow for them to alleviate that pressure off of them and also make it challenging for opposing defenses. But tip your cap to Laurel Highlands, and Rodney Gallagher had 24 points, and they ultimately pulled away with a 5-point win.
Now, keep in mind, that game was at Laurel Highlands. So when they meet again in section play, it'll be at Belle Vernon area. So maybe a little bit slanted in favor of the Leopards with that home atmosphere heading into that one. Should be electric. Nonetheless, the Leopards dropping 2 consecutive section games. They are sitting at 2-2. A little surprising, but I'm not too worried about them. I think they will certainly make a run in the second half. Well, that was a big-time showdown. So was the 5A matchup between Gateway and Franklin Regional. And it went in favor of the Gators. So Jesse Reed's team takes its first section loss. And that was another one that came down to the wire. They were trying to forge a frantic comeback late, came up just short, lost a 1-possession game. Again, this team's taken big strides from a year ago, but there's no doubt that Gateway and Franklin Regional, I think right now, clearly the top 2 teams in that section.
Great strides is perfect way of putting it, because these 2 teams met up late in the season last year. I remember we actually had the game on WSN. I was there with Roger Downs, and I mean, it was Gateway handled Franklin Regional easily. I mean, they put them away easily in the first half. And to see how Franklin Regional has not only improved, but has kind of turned the corner as well in just a year and playing a Gateway team to a 2-point game, very impressive. And also they overcame a 10-point deficit with 3 minutes to go in the 4th quarter. So we talk about Belle Vernon overcoming a halftime deficit. Try doing it in the 4th quarter with 3 minutes to play. And mind you, there's no shot clock. So Gateway can just hold the ball, which ultimately was kind of how this one unfolded. Jesse Reed didn't realize he had a timeout to use. And after, Franklin Regional pulling within 2, could have used it. Instead, Gateway dribbles out the clock. So little mistakes like that, obviously they'll happen, but hey, you know what? Again, I think this is a huge sign of growth for Franklin Regional that, in a year's time, they've been able to improve, and now they can go up against a team like Gateway that is one of the top teams in the section and in the classification, and they can play with them the whole way through.
And our final takeaway from the starting 5 biggest stories this past week, we've been a little bit, talking about losses, negatives. Let's talk about a highlight. Jeanette coming back in a big way after they had a really tough loss against Greensburg Central Catholic. And I thought maybe that would linger. They had a player in Shane Mickens ejected. because of 2 technicals, so he would not be available for what was a big showdown against the Clairton Bears. Jeanette was able to not only eke that one out, they then knocked off Springdale on the road. So they went 2-0 last week. 2 key section wins for a team that it very easily could have gone the other way, Jack. They could have sort of spiraled. That was not the case with Adrian Batt's crew. They are now back above 500, sitting at 3-2 in section play.
And you mentioned the aspect of not having Shane Mickens in that Clairton game, and we saw how important he was against GCC. I really, and kind of walked away from that game against GCC wondering how is this Jeanette team going to, weather that storm without Mickens in that next game against Clairton. They did a nice job. They did it in a grind fashion, 39-34, so really, really low scoring. But hey, by any means necessary, whatever it takes to ultimately win. Good job by Jeanette, not only getting a big win against Clairton, but also getting a second win and going 2-0 on the week.
Yeah, their victory against Springdale is even more defense. They held the Dynamos to just 28 points in that one. So again, 2 much needed wins for Jeanette after that loss a week ago to GCC. That'll do it for our starting 5 takeaways. Now let's shift our attention to the plays of the week. We've got 4 of them this week, and we'll begin with seems like a team that's always in plays of the week, the Norwin Knights girls. As the Knights, they're dangerous on both sides of the floor, and they showed that in short order against Hempfield area last Monday. The Norwin offense used some crisp passing, leading to a Savannah Schneck 3, while Kendall Berger displayed her defensive chops, as called by myself and the one and only Roger Downs. And she gets her first points.
Hosnight's brother, Michael Hosnight, former Spartan basketball player.
It's been a rough go for the Hempfield boys this season, as Schneck hits the trifecta. So Schneck with 5 points. She's averaging just 1.4 points per game this season, but like I said, I think her best ball was still ahead of her this year. As Berger comes up with a steal, and she will get an easy layup.
Yeah, this defense is giving the Spartans a little bit of trouble, Sean.
Great offense, great defense. Again, well-oiled machine in the Norwin Knights. They have just that one loss still, Jack. It came at the hands of the McKeesport Tigers, and it's really good to see Savannah Schneck getting a shot to go. I know there was an article just written about her long road to recovery, 2 torn ACLs. You can tell she's still not at 100%, but I think getting healthier, and if she gets back closer to 100% by the time that the playoffs roll around, she will be a big component of that team. We'll continue plays of the week with the Derry area boys, and the Trojans beat the buzzer a couple of times in their matchup against Valley, highlighted by Nate Papuga's deep shot that put his team in the lead to finish the third, with Jack and Gene Brisbane on the call.
Bill Davis, a sophomore, so a lot of underclassmen getting a lot of time here today. Not a whole lot of time here. Papuga with 3, rises, at the buzzer! Papuga puts the Trojans back up by 2. Folks, we've got a ball game. Heading into the 4th, Derry regains a 2-point lead.
Yeah, what a really fun game this was. Not only 1, but 2 buzzer beaters. Brady Angus also hitting one in the first half, and a big win by the Trojans, and a win that they really needed too.
How was it working with Gene for the first time?
It was fantastic. Coach was awesome to work with, gave great insight, and just really did a nice job breaking down the game for everyone at home.
For those unaware, Gene is the head coach for the Derry area girls basketball team, so he took a night away from that to provide his expert analysis. Speaking of girls, we continue plays of the week with the Franklin Regional girls, and it was a strong defensive effort that led the Panthers to a home win against Gateway. And Angelina Brush put an exclamation point on that victory with an emphatic block in the closing minute, with myself and Roger captioning the picture. She's got 4 points. This would be a big win for the Panthers. Again, it would give them 4 section wins. As slotted away again. Well, it hasn't been a great offensive performance, but the effort and the defense for FR, this time courtesy of Brush, has been a sight to behold. Not the prettiest game for Bernie Puchka's squad, but man, they played some really good defense against the Gators, and Brush, certainly not the tallest player, looking like Dikembe Mutombo on that rejection at the end. We'll conclude Plays of the Week with the Greater Latrobe boys. We talked about this one earlier. Landon Butler reached 1,000 career points against Penn Trafford on Friday, and his milestone came with a key basket to end the first half, as detailed by myself and Jack.
It is Landon Butler with it. 2 points away from 1,000. Down to 10. Tries to split a double team, throws it up, and there's 1,000 points for Landon Butler. And the shot after the whistle as the first half comes to an end. 1,000 for Butler. A player down for Penn Trafford. The team's heading to the locker room. It's Freeze who is down. Just a frantic scene both ways with a lot of action going on.
Number 4, senior Landon Butler, won his 1,000 points. Congratulations, Landon.
Yeah, really great job by Landon Butler. And you could tell the way that he was playing in that first half, he wanted that 1,000 point, finally got it, played a great first half, and again carried it over into the second half.
Yeah, and it was much needed as they got that narrow victory, winning by 3. That'll do it for Plays of the Week, but here on the Hardwood Podcast, we waste no time. We will quickly transition to our Team of the Week. It is the Greater Latrobe girls. They are sitting at 10-4, including 3-2 in Class 5A Section 3. But most impressively, Jack, they are on a 6-game winning streak. They've done this all without what was supposed to be their star player coming into the season, and Emma Blair. She went out with a season-ending injury early in the campaign, but really they have taken their game to a higher level, especially since Ellie Snyder's come back. I have to give a lot of credit to their head coach, Mark Burkhardt. He has done a good job adjusting on the fly. Not easy to replace. You really don't replace a player like Blair, but they have found other ways to find success.
Yeah, when you've got a player that's averaging a double-double on a nightly basis, that's hard. That's really hard. You're not only having to fill the void scoring-wise, but also rebounding-wise. And that's basically, in a lot of cases, you don't have a player that can do both. So you're really having to look for 2 people that can kind of fill that void. But I'm looking at this schedule for Greater Latrobe coming up. They've got a big one on Monday against Penn Trafford, and then they've got road matchups against Hempfield and then Oakland Catholic, a section matchup, and then they have a rematch against McKeesport, which, mind you, is the last loss that this Latrobe girls team has had back on December 20th. 53-38 was the final in that one. I really do think, Sean, that this, again, as of what we've seen, this Section 3 class, the Section 3 conference for Class 5A and girls basketball, I think is the best, most competitive, the most competitive in the top 4 as well. And again, Ellie Snyder getting back into the fold, her ability to shoot the 3 and stretch out the defense some. This is a really scary Latrobe team. And I think that when they meet up with McKeesport in a couple games, McKeesport is going to be shocked at knowing, wow, this is a totally different team than what we played against earlier this season.
Yeah, I mentioned they have 4 losses, but dig a little bit deeper. So they lost 1 game at Kings Fork, Virginia, or against Kings Fork, Virginia, in the She's Got Game Classic down in St. James, Virginia. Kings Fork, I believe, is a defending state champ in Virginia. So, okay, you're going against one of the best teams in an entire state. And then they had 3 consecutive WPIAL losses, but you kind of highlighted this already. The teams they lost to, McKeesport, Oakland Catholic, and Norwin. So 3 of the very best teams. I think McKeesport and Norwin might be the 2 best teams in the WPIAL, at least based on their resumes to this point. So you can see the 4 losses and say, oh, this Greater Latrobe team's not going to be as competitive. But since then, they've done nothing but win, and win pretty impressively against some good opponents, most recently knocking off TJ on the road, 67-59, defeated Albert Gallatin, dominated Connellsville. That was the game where Ellie Snyder set that 3-point record, knocking down 10 in a game. She gets a lot of attention, obviously deservedly so. Camille Dominic is a college commit, the senior forward headed to Pitt Johnstown, but they've got some other players who are key components, Carly Burke, Belly Blossie, Josie Stragus. So ultimately, this is not just a team that was unable to move on after the loss of one player, because they have 5-6 other girls who are all able to step up. So I think much deserved for the Team of the Week. And the question is, will they be able to upset any of the teams ahead of them? I think the Penn Trafford game is going to be interesting, right? Because I think those teams might be fairly close. And then a step up, Oakland Catholic and McKeesport, that would be upsets, I think. But them and PT should be a good one. I think that's a pick 'em type of game.
Yeah, I think that's a great game for really Latrobe and Penn Trafford both to kind of see, okay, because, right now I think we've seen Oakland Catholic and I'm drawing a blank on the other team right now. McKeesport, obviously. McKeesport and Oakland Catholic, I think that are clearly the top two teams, again, from what we have seen and from their resume so far. Penn Trafford, though, and Latrobe, I think they could very well fight for that third spot and really kind of, fight with elbow room and try and see who can get that third and final position. So this could be a really big game. And again, I think that for Latrobe, if they can beat McKeesport, that's going to send a ripple effect out to everybody in Section 3 saying, watch out, because this Wildcats team, they're heating up at the right time of year. And again, another thing that we haven't mentioned, Sean, it's not about how you start, it's how you finish. And right now, Latrobe, in this latter part of the season, they're carrying over into, this part of the season, looking to finish really strong. And if you've got a team that's peaking at this point of the year, that's a dangerous thing. That's a dangerous thing, and it's something that an opposing team does not want to have any business with.
Greater Latrobe, 6-game winning streak. They are our team of the week. Let's get to our trivia question. First, we'll touch on last week's trivia question. I thought this one was, just unbelievable to hear this number, Jack. You mentioned it as well. Vinny Cugini of Aquinas Academy, he's expected to break the WPIAL boys career scoring record later this season. Could happen sooner rather than later. The current record holder is from Westmoreland County. Who has the record and how many points did he score? And the answer is Tom Pipkins of Valley. And Jack, this number, 2,838 for his career scoring record. We did have someone correctly guess that it was Tom Pipkins of Valley, did not chime in with the final total, which is just an incredible, incredible number. We talked about getting to 1,000. How about almost getting to 3,000? That's just unbelievable.
I just when you wrote up that question, I saw the answer. My jaw truly hit the floor because I said, "There's no way. There's no way that somebody can score that amount of points, almost 3,000." And again, mind you, 32 minutes of basketball, so you're playing 8 less minutes a game than you would be in college, and you're scoring almost 3,000 career points. That's unheard of.
It was Brad at Warrior Nation 35 who did get that it was Tom Pipkin. So credit to him. Again, that name's been in the papers a lot recently because it looks like he might not be the record holder much longer. But as of now, it is still Valley's Pipkins, 2,838 points. That gets us to this week's trivia question. In this century, which means 2000 and beyond, how many times have Westmoreland County girls basketball teams won a WPIAL title? So add up all of the teams from Westmoreland County that won WPIAL gold since 2000. How many? We will let you know next week. But in the meantime, we want to hear your guesses. You can tweet us at Westmoreland SN. Use the hashtag #OnTheHardwood to submit your guess. Finally, let's take a look ahead at the week to come across Westmoreland County. We've got some big-time matchups. We'll start on the boys' side. And, Jack, always a good one. Hempfield at Norwin Tuesday. We'll have the coverage of that on WSN. That's a rivalry matchup, and Norwin reeling a little bit. Hempfield area has been competitive. They pulled off a little bit of a surprising victory recently, so that game has some real stakes. But that's not the only one on Tuesday. See some good Westmoreland matchups. Penn Trafford at Kiski area, Ligonier Valley at Derry, Valley at Burrell, and then Riverview at Jeanette. I don't think many people thought the Raiders would be a contender, but they've looked pretty impressive. Jeanette riding that 2-game winning streak as well. And then shift focus to Friday. Shadyside Academy, one of the very best teams in the classification at the Burrell Buccaneers. Riverview at Greensburg Central Catholic. And then Sarah Catholic at Jeanette. Anything jumping out on your ledger for the boys' matchups?
Obviously, Hempfield and Norwin, like you said, always a fun matchup. And, you get to see Adam Belinsky go up against Harry Sowers of Hempfield. So it should be a fun matchup there.
On the girls' side, Monday, Seneca Valley at Norwin. We will have that broadcast. It is senior night for the Knights as they look to stay perfect in section play. Also, Mount Pleasant playing some good ball at a very good Apollo Ridge team on Monday. Wednesday, non-section. This could be another marquee showdown for Norwin's very challenging non-section. They will play at Blackhawk. And to tie everything together, we talked about McKeesport. That's the only team that defeated Norwin. Well, who's the only team that defeated McKeesport? Blackhawk. So that should be a terrific matchup in that one. And then Thursday, Woodland Hills at Franklin Regional, Greensburg, Salem at Derry area, West Mifflin at Bell Vernon area. Leopards looking to bounce back after they suffered a loss against Elizabeth Forward. And then we're also going to have some college action this week on WSN. Wednesday, Seton Hill hosting Pitt Johnstown. Both the men's and women's will be playing. It's a doubleheader. Same for Saturday as Seton Hill welcomes Bloomsburg. Anything else jumping out about either this past week or the week to come, Jack?
Well, for the week to come, I'm going to go with the college games. The Griffs, both men's and women's, riding 3-game winning streaks. The men, they've been on a roll, scoring 80-plus points over the last 3 games. I'm excited for the Griffs. Can they keep it going here this week?
As Roger Downs would say, there's been some McKenna magic. That's the home venue for Seton Hill, and they will be home for 2 games, 2 doubleheaders this week as well. That'll do it for this edition of the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out our website, westmorelandsports.com, every day for articles, for obviously live and archive broadcasts, a lot of other great content. And again, you can also follow us on social media, including on Twitter, Westmoreland SN. But for now, we'll put a bow on this one for my colleague, Jack Ridenour, Sean Meyers signing off. We'll catch you again next week right here on the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast.
This is the Westmoreland on the Hardwood podcast on the Westmoreland Sports Network.